You're listening to Quiero Dinero, a personal finance podcast for the modern Latina. I'm your host, Natalie Torres-Haddad, and I'm here to help you be poderosa with your dinero. I'm an engineer, a blogger, and an entrepreneur that built a $50,000 side hustle, and I'm obsessed with all things personal finance. On this show, we're going to talk about how to make dinero, how to keep your dinero, and how to make it grow. Are you ready? Vámonos. Hola, mi gente. Welcome back to another episode of Quiero Dinero, the podcast. This is your host, Janice, and today's episode is going to be centering around mental health. Now, if you don't already know, July is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, and so we are talking to someone who knows very well the struggles that first gen can deal with when it comes to mental health. We face a lot of pressure as first gen. We have this expectation to really take our parents' sacrifice seriously. And a lot of that manifests itself in perfectionism, overachievement, imposter syndrome, and that can have a really, really negative impact on your mental health. So I'm really excited to talk today to Natalie Torres-Haddad. She is a 2-time TEDx speaker known for her talks, The Foreign Language of Financial Literacy and The Confidence Gap. She's an international award-winning author, a bilingual podcast host of Financially Savvy Latina in 20 Minutes, international keynote speaker, and educator. Her activities have been featured in Forbes, the Huffington Post, and the LA Times, just to name a few, and she's a first-gen college graduate from CSULB in finance and international business with a master's in public administration from CSUN. Natalie focuses on helping those in debt to keep working towards their financial independence. She was born in El Salvador and raised in Inglewood, California during the LA riots, and she quickly began to understand the lack of higher education and financial illiteracy that limits her community and prevents them from accessing basic human rights and equality in resources. She started investing in real estate at age 24 and began her career advocating for financial and women's empowerment for equal pay. Her challenges dealing with student debt led her to dealing with depression, and that has influenced her to advocate for mental and financial health to be taught in all schools and work environments. You can follow Natalie on Instagram at Financially Savvy Latina. Let's get into today's conversation with Natalie. All right, Natalie, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm excited too. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you are a fellow Latina podcaster who's talking about money. So you're a girl after my own heart, but you are so much more than that. So why don't you go ahead and start off with an introduction about who you are and your background?
Yeah. So first off, I love seeing that there's more and more representation, especially in the podcasting world. So my podcast is a bilingual podcast. It's called Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes. And it started off just basically because I wanted to provide that information that many people don't get a chance to listen to or hear, or they just say they don't have enough time. And I say, well, all my content is under 20 minutes. It actually came about from my first book that was published in 2012, and it's Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes. And ever since then, it was just something that I always try to do my best, is making sure I create content that's under 20 minutes. And then about 3 years ago, it evolved to bilingual, all Spanish content. Since I'm from El Salvador originally, I was born there, but I was raised in Los Angeles. I was like a year old when most of my family fled here during a civil war. And since then, I feel like it's been my purpose, but it's really been a lifeline journey. I studied, both my undergraduate degrees are in finance and international business, and then my master's in public administration with emphasis in fundraising. And I started investing in real estate at age 24 and bought and sold several after. And my biggest thing was financial literacy is such an important aspect that we're not taught in college, which I learned the hard way. And we'll talk about that more during the episode. But what that brought my journey as far as being able to teach others how to not only pay down their debt and be able to invest, but to also let themselves feel less ashamed about their money story, because my money story is also very complex, as you can say. But since then, it's been an incredible journey. I was offered 2 TEDx talks, so both of them were on the focus of financial literacy. The first one being called The Foreign Language of Financial Literacy, and the second one called The Confidence Gap, which is mostly catered around talking about the gender wage gap and obviously the lack of representation in our community. So And if we don't have the buying power, guess what? We don't get to make those options and opportunities for our community. So
Mm.
it's been my it's what I love to do. It's to put it down to it. It's what I love to do.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. And so you mentioned your money story. I love talking about that and kind of using that as an intro to really understanding your process and your path to getting to where you are today. Because I feel like so many of us, especially first gen, immigrant, Latinas, like we have a money story that usually comes from our backgrounds. Our families teach us what not to do or what to do with money. So I'm curious what your money story is.
Yeah, it's funny listening to your podcast. I've been listening to so many of the episodes, and you and I feel like we obviously understand each other when you said first gen. So we become first generation in so many things. You also had like a STEM background as well, which is so impressive
Mm-hmm.
when you hear other Latinas, because not only is there very few women in STEM majors like that we took on basically, but that also meant we were the very few women of color that also entered into this job market the same way, where most of my career, the two major companies that I worked for many years, I was the first one. I was the only woman. I wasn't the only Latina. I was Everybody else was pretty much Latino, but I was the only woman, and that was obviously another difficulty dealing with that. The second
Yeah.
one, I ended up being I thought, okay, here I am going into a better, bigger company. And turns out not only was I the only woman this time around, I was the only person of color, and I was the only person under the age 40. So
Oh my gosh.
now, this is, another way to navigate being a first gen. It means
Mhm.
we are not only setting our own path, our own route, but we're also dealing with our own traumas. And my money story is, I think about it, I'm still reliving it right now. I mean, we're obviously recording this during a very difficult time with not just the pandemic of COVID, but all the injustices that we're seeing within our Black communities, especially with the killing of George Floyd. And it brought up a lot of my own, I didn't even know it was PSD. I mean, my therapist was like, oh, yeah, this is what a lot of people are going through, because I grew up during the 92, which most people call the LA riots, but we called it the LA
Yes.
uprising. I was,
Mhm.
raised in Inglewood, predominantly brown and Black community. And, we grew up seeing a lot of police brutality, especially towards the Black and brown men in our community. And so at an early age, I was affected by seeing my neighborhood already was struggling. Like, I think people don't always, especially if people are listening to this, probably some other place in the world. Inglewood back then too, it was financially was already struggling. We didn't have all the resources, a lot of these affluent cities had. And so when the riots hit, that meant our whole community changed, meaning like I still remember the mom and pop shops blocks from where we lived. Not only were they looted, some of them were burnt to the ground. And I remember seeing grown men frustrated and crying, not understanding what was going on. And I was about to turn 11. So as a kid, you're like, what is going on? And as a kid, I always thought I would still do this, especially as a kid. I drive and I'm like, when I grow up one day, I'm gonna have so much money. I'm gonna fix up my neighborhood. I'm gonna put money back
Mm.
into this, because I knew that if you had money, you had more opportunities to really create some change. And the only way doing that, both my parents, obviously, they they had to work the entire lives pretty much and sacrifice so much, but they knew that education would be an opportunity for us. So I went to college. Being the first to do that in my family was a whole nother aspect, but then choosing a career, was I wanted to do finance. I wanted to learn more about how to manage money, and that was um, played a lot to my money story of not. I didn't come from a place where our home wasn't necessarily, we weren't poor to the sense that we didn't, we couldn't get by. My parents did really well as far as not only the roof over our head, but the sacrifices they did for our education. But I was exposed to two different worlds. So when the 92 happened, it was in May. Okay. So it was April 29th, May 2nd. And that week they closed down our schools. And it wasn't like there was riotings all over the country like we're seeing right now. And it wasn't
Mhm.
what I love now. When I tell people, they're like, what do you see the difference? The difference I see now is that it's just not Black and brown people walking the streets and protesting and using our voice. It's all people, and to see white people joining too is beautiful, because now it's like, hey, it's not just us. And
Yeah.
back then, I thought about it, and I'm like, I was a kid not understanding what was happening, but my parents basically pulled me out of I was ending fifth grade and put me into a private school my sixth grade. And back then there was no Facebook, no way to connect with your friends. So I lost all my friends instantly overnight. We didn't get to say goodbye to each other, anything of that.
Mm,
And now I was surrounded with private school kids where it was actually a pretty diverse one. But when I went to high school, it was more than half were white, very fluent families. So, my friend and I we joke around. We were like the poorest kids because we'd have to drive. My parents would drive us basically almost an hour each way to go to school. And now I'm like
wow.
surrounded by like really wealthy kids, third generations and Latinos that, have, tons of businesses. I had a friend who's like family owned like 13 Subways. This is before Subway was huge. So, I mean, imagine how big that
Mm,
was then to compare how much they own
mm-hmm.
now. And it was an eye opener, but it also was such a cool opportunity because I got to see how the poor and the rich live, how we talk differently, how we have different worries. And I think being able to have that insight from both allowed me to come from a place of more compassion, more understanding, and also gave me the responsibility to be that voice for my community, because I never wanted to be that person to be like, oh, I'm bouncing out once I'm doing well and never give back. And in my
Mm-hmm.
family, especially Latino cultures, we know that we're about giving back to our community. So after years of working in corporate America, I founded a nonprofit that was called LA's Prom Closet. We were giving away everything for free, like prom dresses, makeup, jewelry. And we got cool donations from like Jessica Alba, Fergie, like their actual dresses, right?
Mm,
And the way I did it, I had a few workshops, and one of them was teaching financial literacy. And that one was my favorite because I wanted to teach these girls. I mean, half of these girls were coming from foster care, and this was right when the market had just crashed. This was back in 2007 and
mm-hmm.
2008, excuse me. And for them, I thought this is the best tool you'll get, learning how to manage your money.
Yeah.
And my money story was so complex that I tell them, I go, look, I didn't come from money. I had to learn how to, learn first of it. And I had to make tons of mistakes, which I did. And I dealt with depression. I dealt with the frustrations of, not knowing how to do it. And also going to grad school. I didn't go to grad school until 7 years after I graduated from college. So I was a little bit older when I went back, but it took a toll on me because I was working full time. I was going to school full time, and I was running this nonprofit full time as well. I had 11 board members. We had about 100 volunteers. I mean, we had thousands of people that went through our program each year. And
Wow.
it was not overwhelming, but all of a sudden I had lost my job. The market was crashing, and I worked for a real estate development firm at the time. And I had just bought
Mm-hmm.
my first home, so here I am,
Oh man.
30, freaking out, thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose my place. And I saw so many of my mentors losing their life savings, during that
Yeah.
time. So I was afraid it was going to happen to me. And so I spiraled into this heavy depression, um, feeling ashamed that I had so much student debt, that I didn't know if I was going to be able to keep my home. And I didn't know who to talk to about this. And that was a mistake I made. And that's what I learned, that now I know there's resources, and I'm an advocate, not just for financial literacy, but for mental health, because our counties, our cities have certain departments, certain resources. There's actually tons of nonprofits that will either do pro bono or low cost, therapy sessions, support groups. And now, because I mean, back then there was no such thing as YouTube or Facebook too. That's what they always tell people.
Right.
Now you can get therapy online, podcasting online. Like I remember listening to podcasting when I had to like hook it up in my computer at school. It wasn't
Oh my gosh.
available on phone, which is so easy now, right?
Yeah.
So it's been a trial and error, and for me, it was just kind of, I started to pay attention to what my boundaries were, what I needed to learn for myself. And the thing I always tell people I take away from that experience was that if I don't know how to take care of, if I can't take care of myself, I can't take care of my family. And for Latino cultures, especially women, especially, we're told that family comes first, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
obviously a big firm believer as well, but I believe it comes second, because if we can't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of our children, our community, our parents. And that's partly why we also suffer from a lot of mental and physical and all these other traumas that our cultures are still learning to heal from.
That is such a good point. So true. And so I'm curious, once you kind of, hit that rock bottom, like what did it look like for you? What did your journey look like kind of getting yourself out of that situation and taking power back?
Such a sigh when you say that, because it's funny. It's always, now I've learned it, every time I speak about it, it becomes a little bit of a therapeutic process for me too. But
Yeah.
it's still very difficult in a sense where it took me 8 years to publicly say I had a mental breakdown, and I was put in acute psychiatric hospital for 2 days, for 36 hours to be
Mm.
exact. Um, and when I say that, and of course, I have to tell you a little backstory real quick. When I decided to come public with it was, I would say, at the worst possible time, but I was offered this TEDx talk, which was like a dream come true, and I couldn't believe it. But my coach, because you get paired up with a speech coach,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, you know what, I'm going to be frank with you. He's like, you're not that impressive. And I know what he was trying to do, and I know what he meant by that. But he said, there's going to be tons of, really extremely educated, well-known, fluent people in the audience. Why should they listen to you? Or why should somebody across the world listen to your talk for 10 minutes? Like, what makes you different?
Mm.
Teaching. So everybody talks, there's so many people that talk about money, that teach financial literacy, that function may do what I do. But he's like, what makes you different? And I thought about it, and I started to tear up, and I started to cry telling him my story about having this mental breakdown, and how my whole world basically stopped for almost 2 years. And so what that looked like, and I always tell people this, so why I decided during the TED Talk is I thought this is a huge platform. But my grandmother unexpectedly died of a heart attack, like a week and a half after I got the notification that they selected me. And so these next 3 months I had, and there's a lot of prep work behind what to do a TEDx talk that a lot of people don't know. And so I was compelled to be like, you know what? I need to share my story because it's more of an honor of her. And I was still in that grieving process too, I think. So that's when I
Mm-hmm.
shared it. And when I started to share this now 2 years later, the biggest thing I tell people was, it's one, once it happens to you, you can't believe it happens to you too, because I am my one of my best friends is two of them actually are therapists and social workers. And they said after they saw what happened to me, they started to even treat their careers differently. And they'd been in the careers for over 20 years. But meaning they said I was a less likely person to ever have this breakdown. And what they meant by that, and I totally understand, is, I was really ambitious. I was always really successful in the sense. I was always that happy person, that person that you would have never expected this to happen to. I was, always healthy, didn't do drugs, all these things. But it happened. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what's the powerful thing that people need to understand, that your financial state has a lot to do with your physical and mental state. And most people that, especially my clients, God,
Absolutely.
thousands of my clients will tell me, hey, it's either a divorce, a death, or an illness, a disease, which I call. Any of those threes can put you in a financial ruins, basically, or financial hardship. And most of us, we
Mm-hmm.
felt like we're drowning in debt, or we don't know what the answers might be. And you kind of go through the spiral. And so the building back process was extremely difficult for me, especially the first few months, because I remember I was crying like all the time. I had never experienced panic attacks before until that happened.
Mm-hmm.
My parents had never seen me like that. My husband, he was my boyfriend at the time. He also, they were like, no one had ever seen me experience a panic attack. And the anxiety level was so odd that I remember I couldn't sleep well. I had a lot of sleepless nights. But what I had to start doing was, I was fortunate enough, my parents, I basically moved back there with my parents while my husband stayed at our condo. And I focused 24/7 on me. So that meant, one, I couldn't work, which was really difficult for me. And luckily I had an emergency saving, a little cushion, which helped me pay for my bills, the mortgage, all these things that needed to be taken care of. But I lost all my savings basically to do that. Right. And I
Mm.
look how fortunate I was because I had that. But at the same time, I'm like, man, everything that I worked for, I've pretty much lost. And my whole family thought so too. They thought I was done because they're like, how is she ever going to recover from this? It was such a slow process.
Yeah.
It felt like a slow process. And I started doing therapy one-on-one once a week.
You take care of your body by exercising, eating right, and getting enough sleep. But are you doing the same for your mind? On this podcast, we're always talking about mindset and mental health as the foundation for financial wellness. So we're super proud to partner with BetterHelp to get you access to professional, affordable therapy right at your fingertips. Even with health insurance coverage, traditional therapy costs over $100 per session, and that's if you can even get an appointment. Online counseling is an effective, convenient, and affordable way to get help with many issues. You can chat with your therapist at your convenience in whatever mode you're most comfortable with. Just take a short quiz and get personally matched with one of BetterHelp's professional, licensed, and experienced counselors and get the support and guidance you need to start making a change. As a reminder, online therapy is not suitable for someone who's suffering from a severe mental health condition that makes them a danger to themselves or others. Download the BetterHelp app today and get started with 10% off exclusively for Yo Quiero Dinero podcast listeners. Just use the discount code Dinero, that's DINERO, and you can get 10% off your first month. You can also go to betterhelp.com/dinero for the same offer. BetterHelp, affordable, private, online counseling, anytime, anywhere.
With a therapist that was at a nonprofit. So it was a low cost because I didn't have health insurance at the time. I had lost my job and didn't do the whole transition thing. And then I was doing once a week therapy with the group session, which was really helpful. And that was free because the LA County provided that. But with that, it meant also I had to eat healthier. I started doing yoga again. I was starting to talk a little bit more about what was going on through my mind and why I was feeling so anxious and this frustration that came along with everything. And so it kind of felt like I had this pause for almost a year and a half. I felt like everything I worked for, pretty much I blew it up in my face, which obviously wasn't the case. And I think that's the reason why I love sharing my story now. Not that it's easy, it's still extremely difficult because I don't know how people are going to take it. I don't know if people are going to say, oh, she's crazy, or, the typical, and I'm Salvadorian. And I hate it when people, oh, Salvadorians are crazy, or those horrible stereotypes that we hear. You know what I mean? And it's that the Latinx culture still has to learn what therapy is and what it really can do. And so for me, my family was very nervous for me to share that publicly. But I said, look, if I can help other people. And today, Janice, I have to tell you, I still get emails from people saying, thank you so much. The resources and what they've gone through. I mean, a lot of people don't know that most students, especially grad students, once they finish, they, contemplate suicide. They contemplate all these emotional traumas because they're drowning in like 6-figure debt. And so when people reach out to me and say, this really helped me, or, I thought I was the only one. And I tell you, sometimes people think it's only us young people that go through that. And not true. I had a few women right
Absolutely
after I
not.
spoke. No, right. It's any age. And I had this woman who, she was in her late 60s, had just been laid off for 30 years at this company. And she hugged me and she goes, I thought I was dying and I didn't know why I was feeling this way. And it's obviously the loss of, losing my job, my stability, the income. And that's what people are fearing right now and feeling. Unemployment is the highest we've ever seen in this country. This recession is going to be one of the hardest ones we've ever seen. And that's something I think why we need to get these resources out. And I'm so proud of you about this podcast, because the fact that you are highlighting other women, other Latina too, which is great, is for people to not only be able to see themselves and see that representation, which is really important, but to know that these resources are out there for them, whether it's free or low cost or whatever they have to invest in themselves. Because in the long run, money is not something that, or investing in yourself is not an overnight thing. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes a lot of money. And I always tell people that I'm like, I started taking tons of like real estate education courses. I mean, I still remember one program I paid for 20 grand. This was because there was no such thing as YouTube or Facebook back then. So you could only attend live events, right? And it was a week course, but it came back trifold. It was amazing what I learned there. But I think those are the things that sometimes our communities need to hear, that we have to invest in ourselves, yes. But secondly, we have to talk to our family and our friends and our colleagues about what we're doing to make better financial decisions, because then we learn from their mistakes as well as what's worked for them. And in our cultura, that's the biggest thing. They're like, oh, don't talk about money. It's a taboo. And I'm like, that's completely wrong. This is why our culture still struggles the most with finances, because how do you know what your, the language, that's why I call it financial literacy as a language. How do you know what the language is when you buy a home? How do you know the language is when you're renegotiating your salary? How do you know what that language looks like when you're investing? And it's a whole new process of learning the terms, what they mean. And right now every day I'm seeing new programs and things that are altering to obviously fit what's going on within the US country as far as when it comes to the economy. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's part of an ongoing education that we need to do for ourselves.
Well, I totally agree with you. And I think it's the same reason why we need to not only talk about money, but talk about mental health because our communities are not known for like being able to talk about these types of things. There's a lot of stigma around mental health. And the more that we normalize it and literally talk about it like you're treating an illness because that's what it is, right? We're really quick to like find all these remedies for physical ailments, but like the mental aspect of your health is super important and it affects everything that you do. So I just thank you for your honesty and for being a voice for what that looks like because it's something that we really need to talk about more.
Yes, and I appreciate you saying that because it's that whole, it's funny, I always get this. People are like, well, therapy is expensive. And I say, yes, I get that. And if you don't have insurance, of course. However, there's other resources. There are free resources, right? Depending where you live in the state. I know you're in New York and I'm in LA, but our counties, our services, there's nonprofits as well that will either do free pro bono or they'll do low cost. And this is one thing I always tell people too. Someone tells me all the time, oh, I don't want to pay 150 for a session. And I go, trust me, that 150, whether it's one or two sessions, hopefully it's consistent, but that can change how much I spent thousands of dollars because I didn't know I should have done therapy prior. And
Mhm.
I go, what would you rather do? Spend thousands of dollars on medication, on all this other therapy, or afterwards, after the fact that you had your breakdown, as opposed to the preventative, right? And that's something that
Right.
we need to understand, that investing in ourselves also means our mental health, our state. Because when we're mentally healthy, then we can make the right financial decisions. And I think, especially my clients, most of them, when they're going through like divorce or something just traumatic, the loss of a loved one, especially in our Latino culturas, how many times do you get a GoFundMe or,
Mhm.
something for someone that just lost someone? And I'm thinking, God, they can't even mourn, because they have to try to come up with the funds, right? They didn't have
Yeah.
life insurance, or they didn't have any, backup plan or anything. And I think that's always so detrimental, and why we need to have these conversations so we can hopefully avoid some of that, right? But it's not
Mhm.
easy, and I love what you're doing because you're using this platform to not only elevate women, but to give them some of these stories and resources, so know that they're not the first going through it, and unfortunately won't be
Mhm.
the last. But some beautiful stuff can come out of it, like actually, I would have never imagined the type of recognition and things that have happened in the past couple of years from coming out publicly and saying that I went through that. Because before, I used to just say I went through depression, that was it. But when I really started to start sharing my story, I was offered a commercial for Honda and Me Too to basically be myself, and walk through this millennial, like, as a financial expert, talking about like things that they can do, and seeing other videos, features. I did a 60-second doc feature. They did it on me based on wealth, and things that I would have never could imagine, first of all. But the fact that
Mhm.
both of those got over a million views, yeah, a couple million, and it's like, those are the things that, you probably read one of Harry Potter books, J.K. Rowling, but one of the things that I
Mhm.
love about her one of her speeches, and she says it so well. I'm going to paraphrase it, but um, what she talks about, basically our gift, right? You have a gift having this podcast, being able to use that platform, your voice. But she says, when we learn to identify with our privileges, our status, when we learn to identify with not only the powerless but with the powerful, that when we use those talents, it's not only our proud family that will celebrate our existence, but it'll be the thousands and millions of people's of lives we've helped change. And for
Mhm.
me, I think that's exactly so true. And when I get, emails, I get emails daily, and it's just beautiful. And when people are going through something difficult, and not only can they resonate and say, "Oh my gosh, okay, I'm going through this, and I know I'll get through it," but it's this little hope that you feel, because I know I felt completely hopeless, and that's what was happening. I was beyond depressed. I was crying all the time, and I didn't know how to get better. And so, sometimes it's just taking that first step and talking about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So along those lines, so you talked about kind of when you decided to really just open up and share your full experience, you found that that authenticity connected with people in a way that maybe, things you'd been doing previously just didn't connect in the same way. So I'm curious, like, how do you continue to maintain that authenticity, and like, what advice do you have for people that are putting themselves out there, right? Like being a quote unquote influencer and a speaker and someone
Mm-hmm.
who educates people, like putting yourself out there, and that can be really scary. And I think sometimes we feel, especially as Latinas, like we have to conform to this idea of whiteness or whatever is
Mm-hmm.
like palatable for people. So how do you combat those thoughts?
So, a couple of things. For me, I'm fortunate enough that I was surrounded by amazing women my entire life. My abuelitas, my mom, my tias, were extremely supportive. Meaning, it's funny. I never knew how lucky we were until my cousins would tell us. They're like, this is something they'd always tell us. Our aunts would always tell us, "We're so beautiful and we're so smart." It was never one or the other.
Mm,
It was like we believed it, as kids, and that's what
mhm.
you should hear, right? But I think
Yeah.
being surrounded by people that are going to not only challenge you but motivate you, like partnerships is really important. For me, I didn't get married till I was 31, and we knew each other for a long time too. So it's like for me, it was understanding that no matter what partnership, whether it's in marriage or business, or your best friends or people that you surround yourself the most, that's going to be a big key, because not only going to help you elevate you to a better level, but they keep you grounded, and they also keep an eye on you, like, hey, how you doing, how you feeling. And for me right now, that it's been really difficult because it's emotionally draining, everything that's going on. But I also recognize that's a
Mhm.
privilege that you and I have, that we can like turn it off for a little bit if we need to. Like, I can't imagine what these families are going through right now during a pandemic.
Yeah.
And but what I always think of is taking, whether it's 20 minutes or an hour a day for myself. So that could be through, I do meditation every day. I journal at least every day for like 5 minutes. And I always put at least 5 things that I'm grateful for. And every day it's not that easy. Some days you're just like, I'm just happy I had coffee today, or I got up, because there's some days you're like, I need to stay in bed. I just can't do it.
Mhm.
Those little things that we take for granted sometimes. And also, for me, it's checking in, like listening to your podcast too. Like, that's a way, of form of therapy, because I was listening to some of the other episodes, and hearing these women that talk about their journey when they went to college and studying abroad. Like, I heard Joy Valerie. It's like, I love hearing their stories, because it's kind of that therapeutic in the sense where I can identify and say, you know what? Oh my gosh, I went through that too, and I didn't know how difficult that was. I didn't
Mhm.
know, I didn't know other people didn't go through the same thing I did. Where like I said, when I was in college, I graduated in 2004, and most of my finance classes, business classes, were primarily went men. All my professors were all white and male. I had one
Mhm.
one accounting professor who was Korean, a Korean lady, but it was like the representation for women were just not there, and let alone people of color.
Yeah.
Like, there was even a smaller group of us. And as we become, my mom told me too, she's like, as you become more educated or more influential, or whatever you want to call it, to, in these spaces, you see less and less of yourself. And it's true, and it's difficult and it's frustrating. But what I'm reminded of myself is that my grandma used to say this all the time too, but we are our ancestors' wildest dreams come true. So that means we might be the first example for our family, for our cultura, for our countries. For I'm a proud Salvadoreña, but I'm also proud. I became a citizen when I was 13, and I feel like I
Mhm.
can represent not only like Latinas and Latinx, but I can represent those that are immigrants. I can represent those that are feeling like we always are told that we feel like we're not good enough, right? I'm not either not
Mhm.
Latina enough, or I'm not Salvadorian enough, or I'm not, there's always something with it. And,
Yeah.
taking time to really focus on yourself, I think is crucial. Like, I always tell people, list 10 things that you are grateful for about yourself. And for me, I always say, like, oh, it's my education, my health, the people that I surround myself with. And then I also tell people to put 10 things down that there are challenges that they had to overcome. And that's really hard for most of us, because that means we might have to relive some traumatic things, or we might have
Mhm.
to really come to grips of what happened to us. In my second TEDx talk, I described the reasons why we need to do that, particularly for Latina, and obviously most of your listeners are Latina. We um, we are constantly in that, we compare ourselves to others, right? And if we
Mhm.
start to learn and hone on our own, like my mom would always say, God never made a mistake with your color. And I love that she would always say that over and over. I didn't really understand it why, but till this day, I've never dyed my hair. Like, I'm always brown and proud. Like, I have the dark brown hair, the eyes, the light. And I knew a lot of my girlfriends, you know, struggled with that. And I could never like not look Latina, I guess, the stereotypical type, right?
Yeah.
But I understood why she said that, because it's true. You see pictures of me, especially in corporate settings, or it's like literally I stick out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I honed into that early on, that I was like, okay, I'm going to be different, but that means I'm most likely going to be the first to do it, and that means I'll be a example for somebody else. And I think that's what keeps me every day like reminded, like, hey, I'm doing what I need to do, and it's all taking one step at a time. And I know you probably go through this too as a podcaster. You know, we feel like we have to do everything, and then we got to
Oh
do the
my
social
gosh.
media aspect, and then we got to promote it, and then we have to, you know, edit all these things that happened. And so what I started to do is just make a list of my priorities, and then
Mm-hmm.
enrolling people that also want to be part of the journey, because it's one thing shining your own light, but when you start shining light with others, I think that's also extremely therapeutic, because you see yourself in other people, and you see, if someone would have helped me in this particular part, this would have been easier. And then I always say, because someone did help me in this place, this is why I'm returning the favor to somebody else. And
Yeah.
I commend you for what you do, because I mean, I've been podcasting now for 3 years, but I have a team. Like, I have someone that does the editing, the music, and I just record, and I know how much work that is, you know. And I think that sometimes people don't see the behind process, but at the same time, I think this is what becomes it's part of our journey. This is part of what creates who we are as a person, who we are as a leader, who we become as, I guess, influencers, now that we say that, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's because we've done the grunt work. We've done the behind the scene. People only see the end result, and you know, too often
That's absolutely true.
I right, and I'm sure you get that from. I love all your posts on social media, and I think when I see some of these things, it's kind of like, I love that Instagram can be that, like, the highlighted part, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
in the in between phases that really matter. And I think just recently, so I have a coach as well, and she I downplayed because I was like, oh yeah, I finally got my book is also in Spanish, my first one. It just became available on Kindle on Spanish, and it took me about 3 years to get that done. That's a whole nother story.
Wow.
But you know, my first book took me about almost 2 years to write, and then I have two more that are coming out this summer. And all these things, it takes years. For me, it's taken
Mm-hmm.
years in certain places, right? And um, we learn in our cultures not to brag about our accomplishments,
Oh
but
my
this is
God, yes.
right, and this is the big problem. So this is why I advocate this so strongly, and I tell people, watch my second TED talk if you want, especially for women, because this is one of the reasons. There's so many reasons why the gender wage gap exists, but particularly for Latinas, a lot of people don't understand that, okay, women of color are not only making less money, we have, the stats will show, right? So Asian American women usually get paid the highest. They're at the usually 81%, 81 cents to the dollar, right? To compare to their white male counterparts. African American women are getting paid 64 cents to their white male counterparts. Native American women are getting paid 63 cents. Oh, no, sorry, not true. 57 cents to counterpart. Latina women, it is at 53 cents. In California, particularly, I know my stats because that's where I'm from, is 41 cents to the dollar. And so
Wow.
there's that is what is horrible, the injustices that comes with that. But there's one thing that I say that we can take control of, is how we can get paid better, how we can negotiate better, and how we can promote ourselves. So our culturas, they tell us, don't say it, because people are going to think, oh, you're presumida, you're conceited or whatever. and
Mm-hmm.
and that's one that's completely false. If you are doing something that is of worth, it is, you took your time, your money, and energy to do it, let people know. Men have no problem saying, oh yeah, let me pat myself on the back, I just closed on that deal. Yet for women, it's like, oh well, someone's going to eventually recognize that. And I'll tell you this, all my mentors had been men at that point too, because I was surrounded by men, right? And
Right.
the biggest thing that I learned early on, one of my very first bosses, who was like an awesome mentor, he was like, why do you always kind of downplay when you just accomplished something or you did something? And I go, because I was told not to, or, you know, eventually my work would be recognized. And he's like, that's bullshit. He's like, sorry, I don't know if you can curse, right? But he goes,
No, yes, you
okay.
absolutely can.
It's like straight up. He's like, it was bullshit. And he's like, he's like, when are you expecting people to find out about it if you don't talk about it? And I go, well, that's true, first of all. And I had to learn how to do my own elevator pitch. And too often I'll run into women, especially in my line of field. I'm in the finance industry, right? So I meet extremely accomplished women, freaking badass women that are like, bringing in not only the dough, but are doing incredible things, and usually the first. And often they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I have my PhD," but they tone it down like it wasn't a big deal. I'm like, first off, you need to check yourself on your elevator pitch. And what I mean by that is one of my favorite mentors, she's a PhD. She was a single mom of three, Latina, and it took her like 15 years to get her formal education after high school because she worked full time and then went to school part time to get her PhD. And she owns it, and she tells people like, hey, it was not easy. And the same thing I tell people, I'm like, no, it took me years to get to this point. And I explain why. And I say, you know what? I also came from very challenging backgrounds, because then what happens is when we start to own our stories with our challenges as well as our accomplishments, then not only do we create more value for ourselves, but then we can compete with people that might have a higher Excalibur. So what I mean by that is I get paid extremely well when a keynote speaker, right? I'm in the thousands. I'm in the thousands for per keynote, right? And so the crazy thing is, I had to learn how to do not only my own pitch, but why a person's going to hire you for their national conference, right? So they'll look at, let's say, three candidates, and the other candidates could be most likely usually white male or white female, right? And myself.
Mm-hmm.
And they might have better education. Maybe they went to a better Ivy League school, or they went to, whatever their background might be. There's always like that line that we feel like we're never good enough. But it's like when you really look at the numbers, and this is how I have it in my kit, it's like, oh, first off, yes, I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but I not only got 2 degrees in business, I went to school full time. I was working full time. I'm also a scholar. I got tons of scholarships. I dealt with debt. I also came from a very poor neighborhood, also an immigrant family that was actually a refuge family as well. We weren't just immigrants like, hey, we decided to, plan years in advance to get here. It's like, no, they left out of fear because one of my uncles was killed. He was a civilian. So I go, now we're
Wow.
dealing with all those other traumatic things. And we've learned adversity was like basically an everyday thing for us. And so when people start hearing those type of stories, they're like, whoa. And my boss would say that. I remember once I had just bought my first rental place. I was so excited, and I shared it with one of our in-house brokers. And this guy was like second generation, real estate developer. Like his family had money, right? Old white guy as well. And he, I told him I'm all excited. And he kind of like, oh, not a big deal. He's like, I had 10 by the time I was your age, or something stupid. That was like his stupid gesture. And I was like, I knew he was joking at the same time, but I'm like, oh, you jerk. I know what you mean too. And then my other boss
Yeah.
the main boss overheard it. And he looked at me and he goes, it's like, don't listen to this fool. He's like, I still remember he's like, if he would have gone through half of what you went through, he's like, he would be
Yeah.
nowhere near what you are at. And I was like, thank you. And that's what it happens. That's what we need to learn to do as Latinas, as women, is to be able to share that, because then we're like, you know what? Yeah, I did that. It was a team effort. And what happens too is when we start to lower and devalue ourselves, like I hate the word humble. Like I know what it means. I know what it means to be humble, but I think people get that word confused. What they're trying to say is be grounded. Humility is very different. We need to always be humble. I understand that. But being grounded is also a huge asset. And when you're explaining yourself to get that promotion, or, negotiating to get paid better, or, get that job, it's being grounded, but also being able to properly tell people what your accomplishments are. And what happens if we don't do that, then we devalue everything that our family, our friends, our loved ones have sacrificed to get us where we are today. There's no way I would be where I am today if my parents didn't work full time. If they didn't sacrifice me taking to a private school, which was 10 times more expensive than it could ever been, like just be staying at a public school, right? And those are the things that, and I think about that, where I'm like, if I make it seem like it wasn't a big deal getting my, college degree, I don't get to honor my grandmothers who barely had a third grade education level, and their biggest dream was to see their daughters and granddaughters go to school and get the education they weren't allowed to get. And so when I hear someone devalue their worth, or just make it seem like, oh, no, it's not a big thing, and they say it like that, or I always correct them, like, stop saying it's not a big thing, because it takes time to do it. Like you as a podcaster, it takes hours to edit, to schedule, to plan, to the whole process. And people need to know that. So when we're asking for sponsorships, when we're asking for money, it becomes this confidence level. And if we look at basketball players, we look at, some of the most influential guys, they always take the credit, right? They know it's a team effort,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
they even say like, well, yeah, if it wasn't for me, practicing every day, 8 hours a day on the gym or whatever, I wouldn't get to this point. And I'm like, that's exactly what women need to learn how to do and say, you know what, it wasn't easy, but I had to come up on totally different things. There's moments where we had to like take the metro to work, as opposed to someone that's like, oh yeah, I live down the street because I can afford to, right? I don't have to worry about student
Mm-hmm.
debt, or your white male counterparts that are literally getting paid more than double than you are, and can invest, can do the things that it takes us longer to get to. And I hope I feel like I rambled on, but I think it's an important part when it comes to doing self-care, is also self-reflection of what you've accomplished, because your challenges are really what will get you to that next step. And I think too often we make that really difficult and say, well, I'm not only not good enough because the world's telling me I'm not good enough, but I'm not at the place that I want to be. And when we just start recognizing, it's like, you know what, it's you're here today, you're healthy, and you have opportunities that our ancestors never had, I think we're on the right track.
Hola, mi gente. Let me tell you, when I was first thinking and dreaming up this podcast, I really had no idea where to even start. That is until I found the Anchor app. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it is legit the easiest way to make a podcast. And let me tell you why. First of all, it's free. And if it's free, it's for me because I do not have time or money to be spending on boberias that is not going to even accomplish what I'm trying to do. Anchor helps me with so many different aspects of my podcast. It's crazy that they're offering this for free. Mind boggling. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your teléfono, mija. You don't even need like a freaking expensive computer. But if you do have an expensive, beautiful computer, you can use that too. Anchor will help you distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you can share it with your abuelitas and your primas without any freaking stress. I mean, doesn't that sound amazing? I know I love that feature more than anything because it's a one and done. Once your podcast is created, it's going to go out through the interwebs, into people's phones, into wherever podcast app they listen to, and they can find you right away. The best part, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So you don't need to be stressing about finding podcast sponsors. Girl, they take care of that too. I mean, what are you waiting for? It's literally everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So if you're ready to launch your own podcast, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I can't wait to see the magic that you create. Absolutely. I love everything that you said. And I think it's a big cultural thing that keeps us from kind of being able to humble brag because we do accomplish a lot of shit. And we're just not okay with putting it out there. I don't know if it's a function of being a woman, if it's a function of being Latina, maybe it's both, maybe it's just I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I know that I've personally struggled with the same thing. Like for the longest time, I would really just kind of play down my accomplishments and we don't do any favors,
No,
to
no,
ourselves.
and it is how we're brought up too. In my home, it wasn't tradition. I didn't grow up in a traditional home, meaning both my parents were real feminists. My dad didn't even know what that was, but he was raising me like a son, basically. I was his first. I was his first, and he told me early on. He's like, I expect you to have your education, your career, and at least a home if you decide to settle down. And I love that message. So throughout my whole childhood, even until I got to college, I didn't think otherwise. I was like, nah, I'm getting my shit straight if I decide to get married. Like I was being told what most men are being told. Let's just put it that way.
Hmm.
And until this day, I hear women that are 3 times my age will always say, I never once heard that message and I wish I would have, right? And so the thing about being raised by like my dad, because he was self-employed working as a plumber. My mom was working full time. She was like the badass executive on the side. But with him, I think he was always reminding me, he's like, you might have to work. And he would say, you have to work 3 times as hard, right? He's like, you're woman, you're Latina, and you're an immigrant. He's like, people, you just have to work 3 times as hard to be seen as an equal. But he's like, so let people know why you deserve to be there. And if someone tells you you don't
Mm.
have to be there, you don't deserve, you could ignore them because they're not worth your energy. But if you are going to be there, then you let them know, take up that space. And the funny things I have to tell you, so it's June, 2 months ago, I was featured in Forbes, which is crazy. It was crazy when I got this email.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was like I got the email from one of the columnists, and she actually sat in one of the webinars I was giving. And so she saw what I was teaching for about an hour, and she's like, "I love your story. I would love to feature you." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" But the funny thing is, she's asking me some of these questions. I had to remind myself that, oh my God, it's a lot of it was because earlier we're saying it is a woman thing. Like we're almost told to not only be quiet or wait till we're being asked to
Mm,
speak. But my dad was like, nah, you have to throw yourself in there. And in my college, I remember my college class, especially my upper level, since most of them were men, they would never raise their hand. They would just blurt out the answer. And then I had, so it was like, it was frustrating because I was like, wait, here I am raising my hand in the beginning. I'm like, oh, forget that. I'm gonna start doing what they're doing. And then I would
yeah.
sit in my other, like I had a Latino American study class, primarily Latina women, and everyone was raising their hand, and I'm like, oh, that's the difference. It's like, and guys will literally throw themselves out and be like, oh yeah, I can do that, or oh yeah, I have this background, and it's like they have no problem with that. So when we start to really teach ourselves how to use the lingo in a sense where, and not to come off, conceited or that we're bragging, but it's if we're not telling our stories, who's going to tell our stories? We don't see ourselves in the media for sure, right? Hollywood is not a place that's highlighting Latina women. There's like two or three. Like I love America Ferrera. I love seeing, Evelyn Goria. And both of these women have their masters, by the way, too. Like these are another badass Latinas that are doing what they're doing.
I am
But
obsessed with both of them.
yeah, me too. And Emma went to my alma mater, CSUN. So I was like, actually, she graduated the same year. I didn't get to see her, like, just walk the
Oh,
stage.
that's
But
awesome.
so you're surrounded by very few women in the field that are like you could see yourself in, right? Now they're starting to create more
Hmm.
content that is reflective of us, but we're definitely not seeing it in our media. And I started doing this. There was no such thing as like financial influencer, and I found that so funny. All of a sudden, Instagram had all these different. I was late to the game. Social media I'm so late to it. Like I'm not. I'm the least tech savvy person. So for me, the fact that it's evolved to this place, I love it. The fact that now you could find podcasting that is catered for women, for people of color, for Latinx, so, this
Hmm.
has grown. Um, the fact that I used to never see these spaces, there was very few women. And back then I remember the only two Latinas that I knew of were like second generation, didn't speak Spanish, blonde hair, light eyes. Like you couldn't even tell they were,
The
like they didn't look like me.
Telemundo
Yeah.
anchors.
Oh yeah, exactly. And you see anchors, and I'm like, what am I? And I used to ask my mom, like, what am I supposed to do? Do I need to like dye my hair blonde? Do I need to like, what do I need to do? But those are the things that I think right now is such a crucial time, and seeing these. I know I saw that you had Yaneli on your podcast, like all these other women
Hmm.
that are like I call them the next generation. I look at them as like my amazing little sisters because they're doing
Yeah.
freaking amazing things that I could have never done. Um, and the fact that it's because women before me, those few that were there, took the leap. I can do what I do, and then what I'm doing, and then when I meet younger girls like that, women that I'm like are doing incredible stuff, it's like we're heading in the right direction, and we're no longer waiting for the media or Hollywood to highlight us. We're like, we'll make our own platforms, and we'll figure it out, and we'll
Yeah.
speak out for other women to be like, no, I know plenty of women that are more than capable to do this.
Well, and that's why I love social media. I feel like it's been a kind of an equalizer for just giving access to people to put their voices out there. And it's not just like you need a book deal or you need a movie deal or, you need to be somebody famous to get out there. Like you can become that influencer. So I actually want to talk on that a little bit.
Hmm.
So, obviously there's some connotations when it comes to being an influencer. And so I'm curious, like, what are some things that you love and hate about kind of having that platform?
um, I laugh because, well, first off, I don't consider myself. I mean, it just sounds funny to me,
But that's
especially.
what we are. That's the
Right,
word.
right, and that's and I have to. Yeah, I'm learning to own up to it. I always think of when Oprah says that when people started asking her
I,
what's
I
her
mean, it's like the
brand.
Kardashians, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. For sure. No, I get it. And I think that's what it is. It's getting used to that. So what I love and hate about it is, well, so I think about that. So I remember hearing this. I love reading biographies and hearing audios, but Oprah's first few times where people are like, "So what's your brand?" And she's like, What do you mean by my brand?" Like, and that's what I like, and that's what happened to me a few years ago. I think 3 years ago, people started really asking me, "What's your brand? What's your brand?" And I'm like, "My brand," and meaning, I wasn't really sure. I'm like, I don't know. I'm getting paid. Does it matter? Like, I have work. What do you mean by a brand? And then people started. Well, actually, about 8 years ago, people were like, "Oh, you're that financially savvy Latina," because my book was so long, the financially savvy in 20 minutes, right? So they're like,
Uh-huh.
"And you're Latina," I'm like, "Oh, okay." So it just kind of caught on. And for me, I think what I love about it is that people can now associate a face to different important topics, right? So for me, I advocate on financial literacy. I advocate on investing. I advocate on mental health because I believe your mental, physical, financial state is all connected, especially your spirituality too. That's a whole nother thing you and I can talk about because our cultures were about holistic, holisticity. And I think that's one of the things that I'm like, oh, this is, I guess, part of my brand. But
Mm-hmm.
it's also been very cool because what happens is you also get connected with other people that are either in a similar space or you just learn. Like I have some amazing friends who are not only colleagues but they're become good friends that have huge platforms, and the way they handle it is so graceful because there's moments where I'm like, I have a small following compared to that they do, and I don't even know how they handle. I'm like, I even tell them like, how do you deal with like these random DMs, or how do you cope with? Obviously, you can't help everybody, or you can't do everything. Because I mean, I get this a lot too, still, but people expect you to work for free, and I'm like, oh, sorry, I don't do that. Like, I'm not in that place anymore,
Absolutely
right?
not.
In the beginning, I get it. In the beginning, I get it, but I think that's the hard thing too, because sometimes people think um, your brand cannot evolve, and I think that's false because it needs to. It needs to evolve with what's going on. It needs to grow, and it has to, I think, also happen organically. Like I didn't like my first big thing that I could say connected to my brand was when my first book came out. And then
Mm-hmm.
years later, I decided to do a podcast. And then years later, I was doing the YouTube. I was doing social media content. And then I started doing collaborations with big companies that were allowing me to create my own content with, their sponsorship. And all those things evolved. It wasn't like overnight. And it wasn't like the first year that I set up every platform online. It was like, no, you had to, I had to really do the work. And I think that's the cool thing, is that we allow ourselves to do that. But I think the hardest part still is that you're always in the eye of something, right? And there's moments where I question myself and I'm like, ooh, is this too off brand? Like actually just the most recent post, for anyone that looks at my Instagram, I don't know if you ever go through that too, but I had a real frustration, but I'm like, I have to voice what was going on. I couldn't be silent. Talking about all these injustices that are happening. And a lot of my posts had to be about, how you can get connected with the family, how you can, figure out how we could defund the police, or figure out how we can reroute money that needs to go to causes that really are creating change in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And, even my last episode that I did was a Black Lives Matter one. And I know for me, sometimes it's scary because then it's taken away from what I normally talk about, which is all about finances. But I also feel it's important to have, because I mean, that's the whole point of having a platform, right? And I had to really kind of do some reflection, say, you know what, if I lose, if it's only one person that ends up listening to my podcast because it had nothing to do with I normally speak on, um, I'm okay with that, instead of having thousands of people that don't share the belief that everyone deserves to be treated equally. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I mean, at the end, we're all global citizens first. It's
Yes.
not about where you came from or where you are, but it's having that humanity. And when we see children, I mean, in cages, I like, those are the things that I can't even, it's even hard to talk about. But I think when we use some of our platform as influencers, I think that's the beautiful part. You'll either gain the people that will believe in that sense in the same cause, but you might lose some of those people too. But I think that's also kind of something we have to be willing to do. We might even lose some sponsorships. I'm sure there's sponsors that I've turned away because I'm just like, this does not jive with what I'm talking about. And if anything, you're
Yeah.
taking advantage of my community. And there's conferences I don't, and companies that I no longer support, because I'm like, they've made it very clear what their stance is. And you could also tell which companies are, um, are trying to get on the wave of like, oh yeah, we do care, we do care with Black. It's like, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
now you care because only people are calling you out on it, not because it was
That's so
authentically
true.
care, right? And so I think people need to learn to also reflect on that, because people will see that. And for me too, when I'm creating content, I am so careful, and I think it's become more of a responsibility. And I think that's probably another issue, maybe, that I don't like the influencer title, but it's the truth, is um, it comes with a lot more responsibility, and that means it comes with a lot more criticism. And for example, is some of the two videos that I did that were collaborations but content that I created, the fact that I was like, oh my God, they're getting 1 million views and here and there. Well, I didn't take in effect that, oh yeah, I was going to get at least 100 horrible comments, and they weren't even comments
Mm,
about my content. They were most of them were racist. Most of them were,
yeah.
just horrible, those haters. Um, and I think that's kind of the backlash we don't always prepare ourselves in. And even when it's like something beautiful and exciting, that it's like, hey guys, I'm sharing this thing that just happened to me, then the haters come out and you're just like, dang, I didn't expect that. But you
I don't
start,
think we can ever adequately prepare for that.
no,
That's
and
number one. Because
we
I think
can't.
it comes back to like when we were bullied as kids, like you get this like sense that you want to go into the shell and like never come back out. But
Yeah.
it's one it's a
Mhm.
necessary evil because you're putting yourself out there, right? Like it's just it is
Oh,
what it
and that's
is.
what it is. You put yourself out there. And I have to share with you, one of my my friends, she's so funny, because I had a moment that I was like so frustrated that, like, people that, especially when you know them, I think that's when it's more hurtful. You're like, dang, you can be a hater like that.
Mm,
And it was a
yeah.
colleague's comments, and I told her, I'm like, I'm just feeling a little down, instead of being excited about what just happened. And she laughed, and she goes, man, I wish I had that. She's like, I wish I had haters, because that lets you know I'm doing something right. And I'm like, you're right. She's like, I wish I had more
That's such a
haters.
good point.
And I
But
know what she meant.
the thing I think what a lot of people don't realize that behind these brands and these, things that you follow on Instagram, like it's a person.
Hmm.
So if you're following a brand or a person on a superficial level just because you love what they put on Instagram, but you don't want to love who they are as a person and like know who they are as a person, like I don't personally want you as a follower
Hmm.
because I have more facets to me than just like financial information. Like I
Hmm.
have a whole belief system and if you're not jiving with that, then this probably is not the space for you. And
Yep.
I think we have to just continue to drive that message because that's the only way to be authentic, in my opinion. Like, you can't just decide, like, okay, I'm going to have this little cookie cutter, like, presentation mode that I go on social media, but that's not really like what I'm about because
Hmm.
then you don't form authentic connections with people. At least
Exactly.
that's my opinion.
No, I think you're right on. And you know what's beautiful now, and I think this is something I'll tell you that's been different in the last 20 years. Um, Personally, I think is, now we no longer have to, I used to say, like, invite me, invítame to the table, like, invite me to the table. Now I'm like,
Mhm.
the last 5 years, I'm like, you know what? I'm cool. I'm like, I'm creating my own table and bringing people with me. So I
Yes.
think that's something we need to celebrate and enforce. And the more I meet women, I've met so many women of color that are in this space now, which is, I mean, it's just beautiful to me. And I think that's something that's what gets me going every day, honestly. And that's what reminds me, I'm like, hey, we are creating our own space. We are creating our own tables. And for me too, when I'm doubtful of anyone that's listening that maybe has their own business or thinking of starting one, when I'm ever doubtful or question, or like, why do I charge this? Or why am I, why not am I giving this content for free? I'm like, well, first of all, I employ people. I pay a lot for
Mm,
this, and it's not just me. It's like I can help other people as well. So I think that's one thing that we need to remind ourselves, that we are not only valuable, we have worth, but people also need to respect that too. And I think that's something where our Latinx community is still struggling, because it's like, the tias or someone, hey, why don't you do this for me? Hazme esto. Da, da, da. And it's like, hold on, if I keep doing everything for free, then I'm not going to exist later on. And that's why I see a
mhm.
lot of people struggling right now. They're like, well, so and so does this, and this is how I remind people. And so someone that's listening to this thinking like, how am I going to charge more, or how am I going to ask for more money, or how am I going to do this? Once again, write down the list of your assets, your qualities. And then when someone tries to basically lowball you or not pay you, um, show them that comparison. So when the other day I had a conference call with my agent and the group, And the conference in the beginning, I mean, the conversation was like, you could tell they didn't want to pay or the amount we were asking. By the end, it
Mm-hmm.
was like, not only did we like throw in everything that we're like, this is why you want me. This is why I'm the difference between the other 100 people you're looking at. And then at the end, they were just like, oh my God, they felt like they got such a deal with us. And it's true. It
Mm,
really did. Cause it's kind of that reminding them like, well, all these other people didn't have to go through what I do. They didn't spend as much money. Even with my book, I remember in the beginning, someone was like, oh, your book isn't a novel. I'm like, no, it's literally called Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes. So you can read it under 20 minutes. And I was charged, and my hard copy is 10, right? And they're like, well, it's not like a novel, like a thick novel. I go, first of all, it's not a novel. I had to do research. The work that you find in there are actual statistics, things that the book alone costs, like, I always tell people, it's like over $250,000 of stuff that I had to pay for to invest and to
mm,
learn how to,
mm-hmm.
make some mistakes when it came to real estate, make some mistakes in my education. And that's what you're getting. You're not getting like my biography. Like it's not that, it's not like, oh, here I am, we're growing up. It has nothing to do
Yeah,
with that. And so I think when we learn to not only show the time and value that we put into it, I think that's part of the beauty of when we learn to really value our worth. And it's still an ongoing struggle. I'm not going to lie. There's moments where I'm like asking them, and the fact that they're fighting me on this, it's like, well, maybe I'm not worth that. And then you hear other people, just recently, a lot of stuff has come to light where when the women, speak up and we're like, hold on, our male counterparts are getting paid 3 times that. Wait, what? So
mm-hmm.
that's part of the reminder of we still have a long way to go. I feel like we're moving in the right directions, but the fact that we're now using our voice and being more transparent and owning our story, that's how we can remind people. It's like, no, this is my worth, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else devalue that. And sometimes we have to walk away from certain things that we wanted to projects or that might be, but if they're not practicing what they preach, then it's not for me. And for me, it's like, I
Absolutely.
want to do the same.
Yeah, and I think psychologically it's damaging to give away your work for free because then you start to program your mind to believe that you're not worth getting paid to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just spirals into a place where you're constantly devaluing yourself and not reaching your full potential. So don't
Mm-hmm.
do it. Just
Yes.
charge the money that you deserve and then add tax.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
one last question I have for you, because obviously you have been on this entrepreneurial journey and you've created your own income streams, and you're basically doing something that not a lot of people do, especially in our community. So, I'm curious, what advice do you have for Latinas who also have entrepreneurial dreams?
Um, I think the best advice I can give you is one of my mentors told me early on is start creating your passive income now. And what I mean by that is the difference. If your listeners don't understand what the difference, there's passive and earned income. And passive income is usually something that it takes time. It takes more time to build because it could be like artwork, it could be a book, it could be music, it could be something that's a work of copyright, right? And earned
Mm-hmm.
income is what we are conditioned. That's what we're taught in school. Is basically you show up and you work the 9 to 5, or let's be honest, 9 to 9, and those hours that we're exchanging, that's how much we're getting paid. With passive income, it not only takes longer to make sometimes, but it also takes sometimes longer to get that return on investment. And if I would have known, well, I did know, but I didn't listen right away, and that's why you have to have mentors.
Mm-hmm.
She told me early on, and I didn't write my first book until probably like 6 years later, seven, no, maybe more. Um, I would have done it earlier because the fact that I was like, why would anybody want to read my book? And I wasn't writing a book about me, but I was writing a book about, finances, experiences, and what people can do in order to set themselves up better. He told me the same very well. He's like, you're an expert on a specific subject that nobody else is, and
Mm-hmm.
choose that. And so when you start creating some of those um, platforms, not only does it take time, like the first 2 years, I remember it was so hard for me just to sell 100 books. Like it was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But then after that, it's like you don't have to work as hard as you're creating certain systems. So for those that are in entrepreneurial set, I think sometimes what happens is people get so caught up on like, oh my God, I got to get my followers up, and which is good and a bad thing, because I think what's happening right now too, I see too many people too focused on the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
the following numbers, not the actual getting paid numbers. that it takes a lot of time to create that content, right? Like constant posting, constant creating content, you get burnt out. And in the end, that's not really making you money in the long run the way it should, right? So establishing a system, establishing something that's going to be content that you can, create income from. And I think if you stay away from being so caught up on like how many people are following you, but be more focused on how is this going to bring you more income? How is this going to set up a system for you that you don't have to constantly create content? And I think that's the beautiful thing when you do create something that is considered passive income or even rental income. Like that's something why I always tell about real estate is that um, it's not like you're rebuilding the house every single month, right? It's there,
Mm-hmm.
you're renting it out, and it's you're getting an income monthly. Is it takes time to get to some of those places. It might take someone 5 years to come up with a down payment for a rental property, but do that. And for me, that's what it was. People always like, "Oh, you just bought a place and it was cheap," and I'm like, "It was, yeah, I bought it below market, but." I had to stay like 8 years before I could even afford the down payment, and
Right.
um, but I'm glad I did because those 8 years I had to use a lot of discipline. There's a lot of sacrifices that came with it. But, the fact that, 10 years later, 15 years later, it was the best decision I ever made. But at my age, at that time, none of my friends or family were doing that because they thought I was crazy. But I luckily had mentors that were more than twice my age that were, directing me in the right way. And I think that's something that's going to be helpful for any entrepreneur is what areas can we create not only passive income, but what areas can we do that will be more of a long-term goal instead of a short-term goal. And I think sometimes, especially we live in a very consumerism society that we're like, oh, I have to have this to, look like I've got I've got it all, or, I've got to spend more on this, or I
Mm-hmm.
got to have, like, I'm not big on brands. I don't spend money on clothes. I'm very frugal in that sense. But I know why, because I value experiences over actual materials. I value having more time with my family instead of, spending money on shoes or a bag that, I mean, honestly, doesn't help anybody really. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, I think if that's a long answer, but I hope people take that for consideration and saying, okay, because it takes time. It takes more time than just creating it one time thing. But in the end, it's something that you can be proud of, that you can pass that on to the next generation, and it's something you don't have to build every single day.
Absolutely. The best advice ever. I'm such a big believer on passive income, especially with COVID, putting all of these jobs that people thought were secure at risk. Like, if
Mm.
you've ever been thinking about creating a secondary income stream that could potentially become your main income stream, like now is the time. And with the power of the internet, I mean, there is no excuse. It's just a
Oh,
matter of getting past that mental block.
absolutely, and I don't beat our we can't beat ourselves up for it too, because I mean I know I fall to that sometimes where I'm like, why am I not at this number or at this place, or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then it's the cool thing is that's why I love journaling, is that I can reflect and be, oh my God, a year ago I was complaining about this and now I'm here. Or 3 years
Mm-hmm.
ago I wanted this and it finally came true. And so it's kind of understanding that the process is I'm like a tortuga, right? I'm like a turtle. It'll take time, but eventually we'll get there. And I think it's reminding ourselves that it's a journey. It's part of the journey that really makes it worth it in the end.
Yeah, I think the hardest part is just starting. So
Hmm.
there's never as good of a day as right now and today.
Absolutely.
Natalie, this has been an amazing conversation. I am so happy to have you on the podcast. And for people that want to follow you, find out more about you, where can we find you?
Yeah, so website, book, and podcast are all the same. It's called Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes, two V's. And my Instagram is Financially Savvy Latina. But yeah, I look forward to connecting with people, and most of my content is bilingual. So if you want to get your mamas, your tias to start listening and learning, this is the time to do it.
Excellent. Thank you again so much. I'm so excited for everybody to hear this. I think you are just a shining example of like what is possible when you just get out of your own way and really are not afraid to shine in the world. And you are shining, girlfriend. So keep it going.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I'm so proud of you creating such an amazing platform. And I mean, you're going to be influencing so many other people to do the same. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank Absolutely. It's a pleasure. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Natalie's story reminds me so much of my own story. I have dealt with things like perfectionism and overachievement and imposter syndrome pretty much my whole life. And I feel like, especially as Latinas, first gen, like we deal with a lot of pressure. There's so much pressure placed on us, both from our own selves, from our families, from those around us, especially if you've had family that's immigrated from somewhere else. America is still seen as this place where you can achieve anything. And as a result, I feel like we internalize a lot of this pressure to just constantly achieve and constantly do more. And that leads to burnout, right? That leads to anxiety and stress and depression and all kinds of things that we really are just not going to serve us when it comes to achieving our goals. So I hope that this episode inspires you to take a look at your own life. Maybe you've been dealing with the type of stress that Natalie's been talking about and just feeling like, when is enough enough? And so I hope that this inspires you to reach out to a friend. Maybe you know somebody who is also dealing with these struggles. And I really firmly believe that when we talk about mental health openly and when we start sharing our stories, we're breaking down barriers to access information and to just really not feel so alone in this process. So, as always, if you're loving this podcast, please make sure to review, rate, subscribe, share it. That way, people like you can find us. And we're actually going to be doing a giveaway to celebrate 4,000 followers on Instagram. So, if you want to enter into our 4K giveaway, head over to Instagram, find us at Yo Quiero Dinero podcast, and make sure to follow us so you can stay in touch with us and celebrate this amazing milestone. Thank you so much for being here. And as always, stay resilient, stay open, stay honest, and stay poderosa. On the Yo Quiero Dinero podcast and associated entities, all information provided is for general information purposes only and does not constitute accounting, legal, tax, or other professional advice. Listeners should not act upon the content or information found here without first seeking appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional. We assume no responsibility for information contained on this podcast and associated entities and disclaim all liability with respect to such information, including but not limited to any liability for errors, inaccuracies, omissions, or misleading or defamatory statements. Usage of this podcast and associated contents constitutes an explicit understanding and acceptance of the terms of this disclaimer.